Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the debut record from Drungi, Hamfarir Hugans, out April 5th as a self-release. The album has 8 tracks, 48 minutes in length, and they are an Icelandic metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, I was surprised with how they put this album together. I was expecting an album a little bit more broken, with the songs feeling very disconnected from one another, and that was not the case. This is a very mature record that offers a sense of beginning, middle, and end. It has a purpose. So when you listen to this album, you're never lost within the experience of it. You always have a sense that you're walking a path and you can see that path right in front of you. It's just a matter of taking the right steps in order to appreciate the scenery around. So this album allows the individual songs to really work well towards the collective. I enjoy that a lot, and I think it gives great quality to the album itself. As far as the sound is concerned, the first thing I notice is that this is a very raw sounding album, and I think it comes from two different perspectives. One, it's the style of the band to have that raw essence to their sound, almost a live essence to their sound, and also the production behind it. I don't mind an album that is consistently raw, that has this sort of approach, that has this sort of vibe, this sort of feel. But when you're creating it, you also have to be mindful of that and insert some pockets of clarity. The album needed that, because once you start getting beyond the 40-minute mark, it becomes a little bit harder to tell the forest from the trees, and the album becomes slightly more difficult to digest as you progress through it. In order to keep the playability of the sound and of the record alive, either you shorten the album or you add those pockets of clarity that allows that density to disappear, that allows some of that thickness and fuzz to kind of go away, and then you're able to see everything in front of you. You're able to see all the different elements that construct the sound on this record, and there's not one element that's overpowering the others, which is something that happens quite frequently throughout this album. And most of it comes from the bottom end of the sound. It comes from the bass. The bass on this record has a very predominant role. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the bass sound. What I do have a problem with is a lot of times on this record, the bass experience, the sound that's coming out of it, the thickness, the fuzziness that's coming from it, matches the same sort of thickness and fuzziness that's coming out of the guitars. When those two meet, it creates a really big, thick wall of sound that doesn't allow you to see as well all the other elements around. The drums become a little bit more hidden, and it's harder to tell where the guitars are trying to go when they're so intertwined with that same bass sound. Keeping things a little bit further apart and keeping that bass a little bit more softer, specifically when the guitars go harder, would make the sound more engaging, would give more ebbs and flows to the sound, and it would allow the album to stretch itself out and have a much larger footprint. Once again, it's not that I don't like the sound, I just don't like when two elements combine almost simultaneously with the same experience. It just becomes a little bit overbearing. The guitars outside of that have so much life. You see it in the melodic side, you see it in the solos. There is a lot of driven elements to the guitar sounds, and when they go like that, having the bass bring in that fuzziness, it's perfect, because you have something that it's almost replacing the guitars and allowing the guitars to be more dynamic. The sound becomes more textured, the sound becomes a little bit more alive, and it also becomes a little bit more complete, because the guitar work on this album is really phenomenal. You have to look at a debut record and see the guitar sound, the guitar experience, the overall texture that it has, and this album surpassed my expectations from that standpoint. Even the drums have the ability to create this great, amazing experience sung in and sung out. They never really change that much in terms of what they offer this album. They're very balanced and very consistent in terms of the warmth that they give to these songs and how much they compensate the lack of oomph that some tracks have because of that fuzziness, that distortion, taking away from the oomph and creating a little bit more of a fog. So the drums did a phenomenal job on every single track, completing the sound and making this a more substantial sounding album all around. Then when you get to the vocals, you can see a very dynamic, also very raw and powerful performance. If you're a fan of Skullmold and if you're a fan of Fintroll, I think you're going to find a lot of similarities with those two bands vocally and what these guys give you on this record. It's an album that has a lot of movement vocally, perhaps more movement vocally than it does musically. And that is not a bad thing to have, because you want the album to have life, you want the album to have energy. And if some songs musically are dragging or are bringing that energy down or bringing that mood down, you want the vocals to come in and insert themselves in a way that they can inject movement and allow the album and allow the songs to have a much more powerful effect on the listener. It doesn't allow you to kind of sink into the tracks, because the vocals are bringing you back all the way up to the surface. So the vocal performance on this record is really interesting, very dynamic, like I said, and a great range, very powerful, different styles, different approaches, but all matching the overall essence that the sound gives you. All around, I have to say, this is a really well crafted debut record. Outside of perhaps a little bit better production in order to define some moments within this album, creating some clarity and not just really depending on that construction of fuzz and density that the album has, this record really feels like a very mature, well-crafted album, considering it is a debut record. I enjoy this album tremendously. It gave me that raw feel from a live performance, and that is also something that they can piggyback on and redefine a little bit better and really carry it forward as a learning lesson on not necessarily losing that experience, losing that live experience, just fine-tuning what comes around so that the overall album has a little bit of an easier sound to digest at times. Not always, because you don't want to lose the essence of who you are, but at times you have to be considerate of who's going to listen to your album and who's going to listen to your music, and have that at least slightly in mind when you're creating an album that has 48 minutes in length. You want to make the album as interesting at the bottom as it is at the top. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Þoka. Great guitar opening. It has a very somber, dark mood, and then the song starts to grow. It picks up, it has a great tempo. It's a very driven track, it's a very guitar-driven track, and you see the fuzziness of the bass coming in, but because the track is very driven, it doesn't necessarily create too much of a wall. It doesn't really create too much of a dense experience all around. The drums fit in perfectly, they fill the room, they give some clarity, if you will, and they obviously give some oomph to the overall sound. The vocals are very powerful. This track, in my humble opinion, has the best chorus of the album. It's super hooky and it's super catchy. Definitely making this an absolute banger from the get-go. After that, another track that really impressed me was Ófærð, and this is a very powerful song, at least from a vocal standpoint. Sonically, it delivers a lot as well, but I felt like this track vocally really stood out. It's a more methodic song, and because it's more methodic, the vocals come through a little bit better and they create a more impact and they create more of a signature in the overall experience of this track. You have those bass and guitars creating that underlying fuzziness, and then still pushing forward some of the more melodic guitar sound all the way to the top, creating some space between the two. The different styles and having two different style vocals on this track definitely adds also movement but texture to the way the song comes about. But it's a very guitar intricate song with the vocals coming over the top and allowing the track to have volume, heaviness, and grit. But I really love the vocals. I think that is the element that reigns supreme as far as this song is concerned. It's definitely what's going to gravitate you to the track more than anything else. Last but definitely not least, we have Frost. This is a track that has that same distortion, that same fuzz, and allows that element to set the table for what the whole track is going to be about. The bass at the bottom of the guitar sound enhances that experience and creates a consistent experience from start to bottom. The track also moves very methodically, and because of that, you're able to appreciate that fuzziness, you're able to appreciate that density extremely well, because it becomes ingrained in you with every passing second, with every passing minute. The drum sound at some points opens up the track. So here's a song that does exactly what I was talking about earlier, creating some room to breathe, creating some soft spots. Not that the drums are soft, by no means, but the sound of the drums coming in and removing all the fuzziness from around it allows them to be almost an island within the track, and that island within the track is exactly the valley that you needed in order to reset the song and in order for the track not to feel redundant at any given point. These pockets within songs that have a very dense experience are extremely important to make the tracks a little bit more easier for the listener in order for you to get the most out of them without feeling like you've gotten too much in one sitting. This track used the drums to do that, and it worked perfectly. This is it, Drungi with their debut record. Let me know your thoughts on this Icelandic band. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.